Hello, viewers. Welcome back to another episode of the Inter-University Debate. And our topic today is that the Justice Minister doubts the EC's ability to ensure free and fair elections, which were forward for Uganda. So as we have seen, the general elections 2026 are coming forth, and we see that the Electoral Commission has unveiled its plan to consolidate a free and fair election. But there are so many intense debates about the same, particularly when the Justice Minister Norbert Mao comes up and he says he doubts the EC's credibility to make sure these elections are free and fair. So with me today, I have a panel of brilliant gentlemen and a lady. I'll start by my farthest. There is Luwaga John Eliane, who is a student at Uganda Christian University. He is a law student in his final year. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for inviting me, and I hope to have a good time with the panel.
Okay, thank you for being here as well. And the lady on the show today, as our panelist, Brenda from King Ceasar University, also a law student. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. So happy to be here, and I hope to have a good time.
All right, and to my nearest, we have Seth Tumwine, who is from KIU University. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, madam, and it's my great pleasure to be here.
Okay, so we'll dive right into the topic. We have seen that the elections have been, so far the by-elections are a sort of the precursor for what we are expecting next year in 2026. And we have seen that they have been crowded with election violence, with voter intimidation, and so many challenges that the EC is facing might as well be the problem and the reason as to why so many debates are in the direction of questioning whether the Electoral Commission can be and will be able to hold credible elections next year. So our panelist, John Luwaga, what would the characteristics of credible elections look like to you? What are those principles you think that the Electoral Commission should uphold during election processes?
Okay, thank you so much for that wonderful insight into the principles that would be looked out for someone to see that indeed the Electoral Commission is actually organizing a free and fair election. The first and foremost, we have to look at the right and freedom to press. That when we are in an election, let it be very clear that we are allowing the press to cover what they're supposed to cover. Unbiased information by the press. Because if you want to turn the election into some it's a secret ballot, but it does not need you to cover it up somewhere in a room and say that that is what people have voted and then you come out. Let the press be allowed to be part of the people taking what is being recorded. We have what we call universal suffrage as a principle that simply because Uganda follows its democratic principles of election through universal suffrage, the people will be allowed to, the ones who are adults, under 18 and above will be the ones to be allowed. So the moment you say that the person over 18 years isn't going to be allowed, meaning you're breaching that principle for that person to actually take on that right. We are looking at political pluralism. The fact that you have to allow someone who has a political party, bring it forth so that we have the democratic process taking on. So where you can shun the rights of a political party A from taking part of the entire electoral process, that is breach of that principle, because we are supposed to be allowed to bring all the political parties on board to play their game in a free and democratic society. So at that very point, we are looking at transparent elections as just something that we can create as a principle, a transparent election whereby we are going to say that these are the number of people that are registered on this particular voting zone, and these are the number of votes we took there, and these are the number of votes cast, and these are the number of votes that were not cast. The moment you declare more votes from a particular region, more than the ones that were actually taken to that point, it shows the lack of transparency, that you're not actually being transparent. And the moment they ask you for the records, the voter forms, to show at least that, prove to us that there are people who voted and they registered that on the voter records and forms, that means if you fail to provide such information, you are in breach of that principle, because you have to be free and transparent. you must show accountability to the people. If they ask you, calculate for us how you accumulated those particular votes that you're talking about, and you fail to do so as the Electoral Commission, it's back to you. And when you look at what is actually happening, when you look at all those principles, and we just take an example of what is happening that actually recently happened in Kawempe, realize that the Electoral Commission was just a mere sham. It was just standing aside and watching everything like an ordinary person. So we're all asking who has deployed the army. The Electoral Commission was also asking who has deployed the army. Who is beating the journalists? The Electoral Commission is also asking who is beating the journalists. The Electoral Commission is asking where particular votes came from that were being announced. And people are also asking where particular votes are coming from. That on the particular zone you're saying, they took their 700 votes. You can't come out and say that on the same polling station, someone got 700 votes from the same polling station, one person, and yet the rest also had. Yet the total number of voters on that place, they're 700. So Electoral Commission just stood aside looking at all these things that were happening. And that is why when you look at the current happenings, they are a scarecrow of what is going to happen in 2025 at the end as we go for 2026 elections. So the principles that are embodied in a democratic society that govern democracy do really reciprocate into the fairness of an election. That the election is the hallmark, it is the apex of a democratic society. The moment you interfere with the electoral process, you are interfering with the capital D on the word democracy, because that's number one. That is why when we say that we have democracy in a country, we are looking at elections. We're not looking at anything else in this country, we're looking at elections. Anyone who interferes with the democratic process that amounts to an election is interfering with the entire democracy. So whatever was happening in the electoral process of Kawempe, at some point there was even a video circulating where one of the agents of the Electoral Commission put up some papers. They were reading, but they did not read some results, and they put them aside because they had that particular hallmark that was not portraying what was under the table. So they were putting some results down under the table. Some papers were being put down. And at some point, the people of NUP would ask that for us, we have more votes on that particular polling station, but for you, you're reading something different. And the Electoral Commissioner is saying, me, this is what I was given. There is something wrong with the electoral democracy that was being portrayed by the Kawempe elections. And they were a very good insight to what should come out in 2026. We need to be clear about democracy instead of lying to people for them to go and line up and then bring military to beat them up. The first question is, what is the role of the military in an electoral process? Isn't that going to intimidate people? And that intimidation or prevention of intimidation is part of what should be put as a principle of democracy and electoral democracy, that do not intimidate voters. Let people freely cast their vote. When they say it's a free ballot, it doesn't mean that it's not paid for, that you're not paying price or money for that. No, they're meaning the fact that the person will consciously use their mind and go and cast a vote. By having the military stationed just near the ballot box, that brings something for someone who wants to go and cast their vote. So the electoral process was tainted with breach of electoral principles that give rise to democracy, and that should be checked before you go in for 2026 elections. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, John, for that discussion. We see that you highlight principles of transparency, integrity, and accountability. As you stated, the Electoral Commission just stood aside and watched all these actions happen. Yet they do have a duty to us, and they do have a duty to even the candidates that are participating in this election. So coming to Brenda, just to draw into the conversation, he has stated that he has made mention of the political, or rather the barriers that are there in the electoral process. What is your take? What do you think the EC should have done better?
Thank you so much. What I think the EC should have done best is to deter the military from the polling stations, because we need to have separation. There's what we call separation of powers. You cannot have the elections going on and then we see the military coming in with guns and what, yet we are supposed to do this freely and express ourselves. So we see the voters are being put in a corner that they cannot express themselves. They are being pushed to do what they are not willing to do without their consent. And this really it really makes it hard to get clear answers to what we are looking for. If we are saying that we need leaders that will take us somewhere in the future, and then here we are pushing the people to do things out of their will, to give votes to the people they don't trust, or they've not given in their approval. It really takes us back. That's what I can say.
Okay, thank you so much. I see that you have drawn us to separation of powers and the role of the military. Justice Byawakama Simon, at a recent stakeholder meeting in Mbale, he issued a statement and he said that the EC has no control over military intervention into the elections. So what is your take on that, Seth?
Thank you, moderator. Maybe to give you some information to my colleague, Mr. Eliane, what you were saying in the first place. I think Uganda has a bad history on by-elections, not necessarily the Kawempe elections. So I wouldn't want us to attach whatever is happening in a by-election to what may come in 2025. They may be two different stories. Because we have had the Arua by-election where there was that incident that involved the shooting of Bobby Wine's driver. Then we had, I think, some years back, the by-election that brought the Honorable Ceasar in Parliament, which had a lot of havoc somehow. So I think we have had, somehow we have a bad history of a by-election, whereby all focus for the whole country is on one small area, so, or either a constituency or a district. So maybe we shouldn't use this by-election to define what our next election will look like. Things may turn out differently. Then going back to maybe another thing I wanted us to get clear of, our opening statement, which concerned the remarks by the current Chief Justice on the ability of the EC to conduct an election. You know, if we take Mr. Norbert Mao for a coin, it's a coin of two faces, whereby one face is a Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs in the government of Uganda, then the other face is the President of DP. So these are two faces that may contradict at one point. So such a gentleman may make a statement because of his future intentions to define that he entered the system, navigated it, and now he can criticize it. When it's not necessary that the system is not very well organized, but he may also be seeking relevancy or seeking political grounds for his next move. So going back to your question, as Mr. Yowakama once remarked, as you said, EC doesn't have full control of security. It applies and asks the government to provide security, and the government provides. So you have to give it, you don't have to blame it so much on grounds relating to security. Then another thing, the current Chief Justice, if he realizes there are some loopholes in the Electoral Commission Act, maybe as a Chief Justice, he could have tabled a bill in Parliament which can make changes in the powers of the EC. Maybe the EC during elections may have authority and powers over security. Maybe it can be more powerful than it is today, such that it has full control. But in the instance where the EC doesn't have full control on security, you don't have to blame it so much. So instead of complaining like a layman or any other person, a random Ugandan, he has at least some powers and he can effect change. So if he can table a bill before an amendment bill before Parliament to amend the Electoral Commission Act, he can do so in order to bring about the changes that he sees are important. Because I think I've heard the Right Honorable Deputy Speaker demand him of Electoral Commission reforms, to give a report on the Electoral Commission reforms. So I think he can continue in that journey and make the necessary corrections. It's not too late to do it before 2026.
Okay, thank you for your discussion. You mentioned that we are so focused on the Kawempe by-elections, and yet we've had other by-elections that we should not rely on that to determine what is going to happen in 2026, the general election. But in 2020, when we had the general election, it was extremely, literally whatever is portraying right now is what portrayed then. There were so many people that were killed. There was electoral violence. There was voter intimidation. It is literally the same thing happening no matter what kind of election it is. I think that is one thing that we have noted throughout this whole process. And you mentioned for Norbert Mao to come out and criticize the Electoral Commission. You think he might have an ulterior motive. But I think people have come up, discussed the same issue, and they have outlined where the law is and what it says about this. There are instances where the Electoral Commission has stepped aside instead of fulfilling its duties. There are instances where it could have said something. In an article I was reading today morning, and the author mentioned that the Electoral Commission has rather remained silent. Yet it coming out and just condemning these acts could mean so much for democracy in this country. So don't you think that indeed Norbert Mao is right to make his statement that he doubts the credibility of the Electoral Commission? Back to you.
I don't think he's right. Reason being that someone who is in the best position to effect change shouldn't come out to complain. I take you back to the fact that this is someone leading a political party, which is an opposition political party, but occupying a public office. So you are in an office where you can effect change. You are in an office where you have the ability to change what you think is not right with the Electoral Commission. Amend the act and bring the changes. That's what I'm saying. And by the way, regarding the previous Kawempe election, if we consider the voting day, I didn't hear any complaint of violence on voters or on opposition leaders on the election day. I didn't hear anyone complaining. I think the issue was only with the press, which I haven't realized the reason why. But the actual people who are much involved in the voting, the voters and the candidates, I don't think anyone was tampered with on that very day of the election, which I think the media is the only one overhyping this situation. Otherwise, on ground, the election went well. And you would ask your question, if the other side wanted to rig an election, how come this person won with, I think, more than half of this one's votes, more than half, and was announced on that same day? What could have been the intention? So I want to feel that, going back to your question, that Robert Mao could be trying to seize an opportunity to also turn to political grounds and make a statement.
Okay, thank you for your insight on that. I would come to John. I would like you to comment on the previous speaker's submission. He thinks that the Electoral Commission has really done its job. It has fulfilled its mandate, and Norbert Mao is in no way to criticize it. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I love it when my brother downplays the events of the Kawempe by-election as though they were nothing to what was being, or to what is supposed to be determined for 2026. We are looking at 8 by-elections that have taken place in this country since the one of Omoro. That's when we had NRM's Andrew Ojok, that was 2022. We had Herbert Edmund Ariko, that was 2022 still, who won with the Soroti by-election. We also had Emmanuel Omoding for NRM on 23rd of February 2023. We also had a news on 7th of July 2023, We had different people coming until we had the Kisoro woman MP recently in November 2024. But we have never had incidents of taking black members to all those places, just the way they did for country by-election. We have never had incidents of deploying the military and the UPDF and whichever group of people that was deployed to go to that side. We have actually had the emperor being exposed as being naked in these current by-elections. That is when we saw the new people following protocol, following the law, following that this is the procedure, this is the place for campaigning from, but then the Jat people come and beat them without any reason. And I think he has actually noted that. Although he will say that on the voting day no one was hurt. The issue of being hurt was not physical, that someone was beaten or anything apart from the media and the journalists. We are looking at the intimidation that was pressed onto the voters. The intimidation that actually people decided to leave the voting area and go away. The issue of them now announcing a new person as the winner is not supposed to actually say, people will actually miss the point in whatever NRM was doing. People will think that NRM was trying to bribe the election so that it wins the county by-election. That is no. It's not the answer. Whatever NRM was doing in Kawempe on that very time of the election was as simple as trying to show you that we are coming at any time. 2026, be prepared. We are coming. If you think that the media is what is always creating the havoc that we always create backwards, and it reports the 2026 election. Remember 2021 elections were a very bad match for the president and for the government because everything was being exposed to how it was done, that this one has been shot, this one has been shot, and everyone would capture that, and BBC would report that on their platforms out there in America and elsewhere. So now they are saying, you who is reporting, we are starting with you. So that come that time of 2026, you are not on that scene, because we shall beat you even if you're not doing anything. That is the record we are trying to set aside. Because we have had different by-elections. Did they beat the journalists in Kisoro by-election? Did they beat the journalists in Dokolo woman elections? Did they beat the journalists in the Serele by-election? Did they beat anyone in those by-elections? We are looking at the Kawempe being the center for Buganda at this point. That is where they were trying to show that we have force, we have power, we are coming. We might not win you at this point, but we are coming. They are trying to show that by getting 9,000 votes, we are now coming, we're on our way. Though you got 17,000, that doesn't mean that on the other end we shall not win. They are saying Kawempe might lost in Kawempe, but we are going to win other areas like that. So you prepare for that coming. That is what they are trying to do. And we should all remember the coming of Jesus Christ was predated before, and the people were trying to announce the Savior is coming, the Savior is coming. So that's what we are also trying to do for NRM people. That yes, you're having the by-election, but we are coming. Anytime we are coming. And he talked about Norbert Mao's statement. It's laughable that anyone could not actually see that Norbert Mao is just acting a dead clock that is right twice. Whatever Mao said was really the truth. Although it is being said by someone we might not trust. But the issue is, it's a dead clock that is working twice. So we have to believe that this is the time, it's now, right? So Mao is trying to portray that indeed the Electoral Commission is failing on its work. Let's now assess the Electoral Commission and the work it had in Kawempe. This is the Electoral Commission who didn't know that there are Jat people in Kawempe. The Electoral Commission didn't have knowledge about the Jat people. I don't think he also knows that. I don't know whether Electoral Commission knew about the heavy deployment on the voting day and whether it was necessary, because remember, it's about proportionality. That where Electoral Commission has failed with the police, that's when they call in for other intervention. But in the first place, UPDF was fronted. All the speakers of NRM and the ones of Electoral Commission didn't know about that deployment. We are saying you have now lost track of the election that you're actually having. It's you who is supposed to call the person, you as the Electoral Commission, invite the police, invite the UPDF when things have gone out of hand. Early morning, 7:00, trucks were being loaded to go to Kawempe. What was the rationale for that deployment? Outside the knowledge of the Electoral Commission. The failure of the Electoral Commission to account for all these things and the beating of the journalists shows that it was just outside the scope of what was happening in an election. Indeed, NRM was the one acting on the issue of Electoral Commission. It was done acting on behalf of the Electoral Commission by just merely announcing the other person as the winner. That was not their goal. Their goal was to show you intimidation that we are coming at any time. So that if you think those things ended, we are going to bring more fire to you people because you have been showing us headache. So at the end of the day, we are looking at the heavy deployment of the military, the beating of the journalists, and all those different things that happened in Kawempe and were not accounted for. Because even the Electoral Commission was not even consulted about these things. So for Mao to say that the Electoral Commission has lost track of the elections, it is the right thing. It's the right thing, and it's a thumbs up for him, because that is true, regardless of what history we have about Mao. The truth is the Electoral Commission has lost track, whether people will believe it or not. But the fact is, the Electoral Commission is actually merely going to announce things that will, you look for the elections of 2021 and see what the Electoral Commission did. It actually said that we have not considered some areas because we don't think they had significant impact. That was the headline by the NBS. They were interviewing Justice Simon Byabakama, and he said there are some polling stations we didn't bother to count or didn't bother to put into consideration because they had insignificant figures. To who determines insignificance? Who determines what not to count and what to count? Because that was Buganda that never counted. So at the end of the day, we're looking at the Electoral Commission playing on the other side. Because we even look at the fact that they called them to gazette. They called them to gazette the information of Nalkola. And then they came out and said, we as the Electoral Commission, we don't have money for gazetting. From which heaven did that money come from for them to gazette him and then publish that information? So we are looking at the Electoral Commission trying to play the other side of the government, trying to side with the government, trying to be in a marital bed with the government, because little by little we shall see them by their actions. So we are looking at the fact that at the end of the day, the failure of the EC to account for the heavy deployment, the failure of the EC to account for the beating of the journalists, the failure of the EC to account for everything that happened in Kawempe on the voting day and even before the voting day and all those times of campaigns, shows us that the Electoral Commission has lost touch with the elections themselves. And that's the core mandate why it was put. So I do feel like we need to sit down and use either 4 eyes or 6 eyes for us to see exactly what was happening in Kawempe as a very good replica of the 2026 elections. No one should actually think that by announcing the no candidate as the winner, the NRM had lost. NRM won that election through its intimidation, because that's what it wanted. Look through all the 8 by-elections that have happened before. There was nothing to do with intimidation that happened in Kawempe. But they wanted to show the Baganda people that we are coming. They did do that in Dokolo. They did do that in Serere. They did do that in Omoro. They knew that there is no need for heavy deployment in Omoro. But they did that in Kawempe, in the central, not to actually beat anyone, because there is no terrorist who promised to come. Unlike the statements of Balaam, which I wanted to avoid, because they carry no water, they carry no sense that there were deployments of heavy trucks with stones. That no one even who is sensible can believe that statement. So I don't want to go back to that, but we're looking at the fact that their issue was not that there was a security issue. It's not like there was an issue that was supposed to be threatened, but they were saying that we want to create that platform for intimidation so that people of Buganda know that we are coming at any time, because they didn't do that in the rest of the by-elections. That is why we are saying this should be now a replica of what is coming in forthcoming 2026 elections, because in 2021, none of those things happened in northern Uganda. They were all happening even in central. That is why they killed the 54 plus people, because of Chagulani and the campaigns and everything. So that's where everything was happening. None of those things happened in the Barara, that they've killed 20 people in Barara. All those things were happening in Buganda. And even the intimidation in the by-election happened in Buganda. For someone to say that it's not a precursor or it's not a replica of what's going to happen in 2026, it's being unable to analyze these issues the way they're unfolding. Yes.
I need to.
Yes, please go ahead.
Because he's driving this talk into a tribalistic sort of thing. Where he says they were telling Uganda, we are coming, we are coming. The 2 candidates competing were both Uganda in the first place. So I don't see if these ones were complaining about the tribe thing.
We had over 10.
I mean, because we are drawing a line on 2 people. The Noop candidate who won, and the NRM, because there is this belief that all the security was deployed in favor of Honorable Nambi. So I wanted to inform him that the 2 candidates, in fact, belong to the same tribe. If they were trying to talk about tribalistic stuff, it wasn't favoring anyone. Then on another matter, I think issues in Central, because Kampala is no longer for Baganda only, if we be honest. Because the people seated in this room, many of us are not Baganda, and we live here, we thrive here, and we are happy here. So Central is the center for this country, and we are all here. So this place has become so sensitive, whereby I think it goes back to the first serious demonstration we had, which was for Kawaka, when he was going to Kawayunga and he was interrupted and there was that riot. And events kept on, and they burnt buses and whatever, then events that followed, riots that followed. At one time, they included the killing of, was he a deputy IGP or one of the IGPs for Kahula, and he was hit with an iron bar in Kampala here, and the man died. So from there, the security themselves started worrying about their own life, because if the demonstrators can kill people, it means it is now a survival kind of war. So everyone wants to survive in this incident. So whenever there is, I think our politics have taken a twist. That's why people who get a microphone and sound so smart and wise and informed like Norbert Mao cannot generate 5 million votes in an election, because our system of politics has shifted from the other old politics of diplomacy and land people to now an act of mobilization, whereby whoever goes out and mobilizes people leads. So the mobilization calls for mixed feelings, and most times the rallies, the supporters most times act out of emotions, and in the due course even some bad groups come along, and so even when the security has bad motives, it gets an excuse to come on board, because they have that reason. The reason they introduced the public order bill, such reasons. So I think this region has become so sensitive. If you are to credit EC, if it has organized about 8 or 7 by-elections in this term, 2021-2026, and out of the 7, only one has been, has had, 1 or 2 has had such complaints as you're saying. It means you cannot, if someone organizes 7 events and only 2 don't, or 1 doesn't come out as successful as you wanted it, you can't blame the system for being not organized or not able to organize an election. But 2 things I wanted us to put emphasis on. One is that EC has no power to bring security on ground. The jets, the whatever you're talking about, EC did not order for that. So meaning we don't have to blame EC. If the Electoral Commission Act doesn't give it enough powers to organize a free and fair election with power over everything, Honorable Mao is a minister for constitutional affairs. He has the ability to table a bill, an amendment bill into Parliament and amend the act. So he can do that instead of coming here to complain before us. He can go ahead and amend the act such that the next time we don't have excuses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That has been quite an intense discussion, as we have seen. Both of you are not on the same side. So after the break, we would hear from our beautiful lady on the panel on which side should be taking and what her views are. So we shall be taking a break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back to the second segment of the inter-university debate. And where we had broken off is that our two colleagues, our panelists, were in a heated debate about whether the EC will and can be able to hold free and fair elections come 2026. And we were having Seth saying they have done their duty, they have done their mandate, they cannot go outside what has been provided by the Electoral Commission Act. And rather, our other panelist, John, believes that there is more that the Electoral Commission can do about the ongoing electoral process. Therefore, drawing our next panelist, Brenda, into the discussion, we would like to know what are your thoughts on Norbert Mao's statement, doubting that the Electoral Commission does not have the ability to hold free and fair elections next year.
Well, thank you once again. My thoughts are that Norbert Mao's statement is true, that the EC's actions are really showing more red flags. Because if we are to go back to 2021, these things were happening and the ECs were quiet about it. We saw this Amuriat being driven forcefully from his office to the nomination ground without shoes, and the ECs were quiet about it. Nothing happened to that. And if we are seeing these by-elections, actions repeating themselves, shows that there is red flag and more bad things coming in 2026. And him coming up to give that statement does not mean that he has two faces. Yes, he might have had some faces in the past where we saw how he left his party and crossed to the other side. But him as a person also has his... Norbert Mao has always been an analyst. He always analyzes. And this could be one of the things that he has seen as the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs that needs to be corrected, that the EC needs to step up and then work on their weaknesses. Secondly, the EC is overshowing their actions that they are on the side of the government and leaving other opposition leaders helpless. They always do things in line with the government. Bringing the military to the ground was not necessary, and they kept quiet on it. They didn't say anything, meaning they are condoning that action. And in the future, it will happen again, and they will still condone. And the excuses they will give is that they don't have a right to invite the military to the grounds. It's the government that always deploy them there. The government is deploying them on their area. There should be a boundary, and they have the rights to oppose it. It's their right to make amendments if necessary, which shows clearly that there's some connection between the EC and the NRM that they are trying to play some games with the leadership of Uganda and their interest. They're only serving their interest and not the interest of the people.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to understand from you, you've mentioned that there should be amendments that should be made. Which kind of electoral reforms do you think that should be put in place to curb such vices that we are seeing today?
The Electoral Commission can have electronic voting processes, and they can have peaceful elections that will have without the military, where everyone is inclusive and everyone has a right that is not infringed by the military or any other security personnel, that the journalists will come and express themselves, do whatever caption they want to do, and they are free, everyone is okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Coming to our panelists, Seth, what do you think are those electoral reforms that are needed in order to curb the vices that we are seeing today?
I think before we make those reforms in the first place, as Ugandans, we need to tame our culture somehow, because as I told you earlier on, that our political culture has taken a twist, and we have become more of mobilizers, noisemakers, and it's not only in opposition actually. However, it's majorly in opposition, but it is now kind of shifting into NRM as well. We have a member of parliament called Honorable Sechko. In the previous elections, there were those clips circulating where he kicked a ballot box. So someone, a full member of parliament, is incumbent, he gets a disagreement and kicks a ballot box. So sometimes the security organs act in a manner that is going to perfectly fit the behavior of the people. So I would think that before we do anything, in the first place, as a country, we need to tame our culture and act in a diplomatic manner. Otherwise, we have always seen it. We saw in the elections of 2016, whereby I think NRM got, were they 3 or 1 election in this market is called Ewachiseka around here in Kampala. And people were seriously looking for one person who cast that vote. They wanted maybe to chop off his head. So that kind of extremism, we need to first eliminate it in our political culture and in our political system. Then having tamed our culture, I think much of what we see as security, much of security intervention into the voting process can reduce. Then secondly, since the issue is more on security, maybe we need to draw a line more on what powers does EC have over security during the elections? Is it in full charge of the security? Can they decide, maybe if we say that the returning officer or returning officer of the polling station is the one in charge, is the one to order police to take action, or maybe the army or whatever? That should be the case. Maybe we can make such reforms on the authority or the powers of the EC. But going back to what we were discussing on, I think our politics have become more of staging stunts. The president of FDC, this lady just said that he was pushed out of the car with bare feet to go and register. Did they keep pushing him throughout the whole campaigning process because he spent the whole campaign on bare feet? Meaning it was a stunt, he said, maybe to show that maybe to look for sympathy, because we are now, most of the people look for sympathy votes. So it's more on to our culture before we make the changes in the and do the electoral reforms. However, the person complaining, Honorable Norbert Mao, I think before becoming Minister for Constitutional Affairs, one of the key issues that he agreed on with the president was electoral reforms and arranging for a transition, I think, for the future leadership after President Museveni. So the matters he discussed indoors with the current regime, he didn't share with us, and neither did the regime share with us. So when he comes out complaining, we may ask him the same questions. Before becoming a minister, you had an agreement with these people. Did you break the agreement? Did they break the agreement? Or this is what you agreed upon? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. You cite vivid examples of one candidate kicking the ballot box, and you're saying that is that rather calls for a response of having deployment of security in these areas, and you're citing that as an example generally of having security in these areas. But do you think the force that the security is using is proportionate to the actions that the candidates are doing?
Once we get into such situations, it's hard to determine who is going to use more force because everyone is trying to overpower the other. If you use this amount of force to disrupt the process, I may have to use more force to stop you. I may not have to match the kind of force you're using. So I think it's better we prevent it rather than going around to measure the amount of force and energy applied in these processes. We can change this for sure. Because if they say that NRM reaches elections up country in those areas where it's dominant, because I think NRM is still dominant in some areas, the fact that it has more MPs and it has most of the chairperson LC ones at local council levels. So if they rig elections in those areas, but still there are opposition members in those areas, why don't we see such incidents out there, out of Kampala? So, as I told you earlier, this area is so sensitive and it has had so many stories and so many riots, and in a bid to prevent that, these people end up using a lot of force. Maybe if we change our culture and we tame our manners, the security will not have no grounds to intervene.
Okay. Thank you for your view on that. To our panelist, John, our panelist Seth has discussed that right now we should not be measuring the amount of force that's being used in these electoral processes, but rather to just go in head on, and because you do not know what the other person is, what kind of force the other person may use. But let us keep in mind that these are civilians, unarmed civilians, against security forces that are armed, against not just regular police officers or policemen, but these are JAT officials. So what is your take on that?
Yes, thank you so much for your question. I want to be honest that there is what we call the strawman argument. The strawman argument is that form of argument where someone will construct perfect a false argument that will, at the end of the day, make it hard for rational debate to intervene. When you look at the issue of the military, I do not want to play about it. I do not want us to lie that the military, for example, in the particular elections and by-elections that have been happening, intervened and used force simply because it was responding to citizens. By beating the journalists in the Kawempe election, what force were they trying to show? What response were they trying to show? Were they threatened in the first place? When they were beating Honorable Nalukola at that time when they were campaigning, really the videos were very clear that Nalukola and the team were actually moving on the sides of the road, moving. What response was there to show that indeed there was a threat that needed intervention? The first intervention should have come from police. By bringing the JAT, those people should work at the border. Those people work for terrorists. By bringing them into the electoral process, it now shifts from electoral democracy to politics. It's now politics at play. That simply because this is an opposition candidate and the other is NRM, that is why that argument will work. That we are now saying military should step aside from elections. Because in the first place, as the argument was well laid out, my argument was clear that the Electoral Commission in itself, it also didn't know about the deployment of the JAT. It did not deploy the JAT. We did not say it has powers to deploy the JAT. We were saying, in the first place, it also didn't know about the deployment of the JAT. The argument is, it's like you having a home, but I'm asking, who is that person sleeping in your home? And you're silly telling me that I don't know. I also saw the person sleeping in my bed. That's the argument we're trying to construct. That the Electoral Commission is in charge of the elections and the by-elections. By you asking as a citizen that who is that person that is having a mask and the electoral commissioner or the other person will tell us that we don't know that person, it shows you've lost track of the election. Because in the first place, you're the one to conduct it. Anyone to be deployed at that station should be by you. So the fact that the other person will come out from NRM and deploy that person, or even, let me say, Muhozi, or even the commander-in-chief, the president, will deploy those people. It means you've lost track of the election. Second, the argument of the military should not be played about in such a democratic society. The deployment of the military should be the last resort. Which students, which people, which civilians did we see carrying sticks to go and beat people? There was a false argument put forward by Balaam, and I in the first place I said I don't want to even comment about it, because his argument was that there were trucks and trucks full of stones, and that's why they brought the military, because they were trying to beat people. But we want to know, we want to believe you, we want to actually understand from you what proof was there to show that there was a threat, imminent threat, that needed you to intervene using such armed forces. So for us, or for you to go and beat someone who is not armed, and then you come out and justify it that it was force that those people were using, it is a wrong measure. It's a wrong discussion, because you're lying to the public. There was no intervention from the citizens at some point. We could even see that they would point at a journalist having a camera. At that point, when we let that one by-election, because he said, the comparison he made was on the 8 by-elections, that there have been very many by-elections that have been made. Only one is where things have gone wrong, so it doesn't mean that the entire process has been lost. Guess what? That 1% can be the end. When you look at the Arab Spring, only one person started the entire thing by burning or setting himself on fire. And so when you downplay about it, it can cause the entire thing that will spring from there. And that's why it's called the Arab Spring, because it was just one person started it, and it started springing to everyone. It started spreading like wildfire, and everyone was waiting until the government was removed from power. So I would not downplay the by-election that was held in Kawempe, because although we had 8 and they were okay, this one by-election was a show of intimidation. The deployment of the military was not necessary. We want to believe it. We want to agree with it. The deployment should have come when there was imminent threat, but from the beginning of the electoral process in Kawempe, the deployments were very unnecessary. And we are saying the Electoral Commission has lost track of the electoral process. Because when you look at what is happening, it is showing that they also don't know what is taking place. Why would we now trust you to conduct a free and fair election? Yet we also know at some point you don't know what is taking place. Where do they get the results that they will read? Because now, if at the end of the day, we are seeing them at the top there, at the top platform where they were trying to read the elections, the ballots from, and trying to count, but some were being hidden under the table without even notifying the public that this one has an issue like this, but then we are putting it down. There was no notification of that. Just that small action can discredit the entire commission, that they're actually biased towards something. We are looking at this point as a precursor for the next elections. We know the story of the cocking of the crow. The crow, or even the cock that we know most, the one that will cock in the morning and it will do its sound, and its crowing will be more not for itself. When it makes that sound, it's not for itself. That sound is for all of us to listen to. And that's why many people will wake up in the morning, because of the crowing of the cock. So that sound does not benefit the cock, it benefits us who are listening to it. So we're supposed to use the elections or the by-elections of Kawempe as a good insight into the next move that we are having in 2026. Now, you can't tell the journalists to go to Kawempe empty-handed simply because the elections of Kawempe were just a small thing in the lake. We are looking at them also saying, by the way, for the next election, I think we must actually do like this. That is because this election taught them what they must do in the coming election. So we must not downplay this Kawempe by-election because it was full of supporters. The rest of the elections that we're having, it's when NRM was actually having more support. You could actually see Nomoro, who was interested in Nomoro as such. The NRM, the NRM officials are the ones who even won the elections. So they have been winning and they have been being gazetted immediately. That is why it even came in the issue of Kawempe by-election, and they stupidly came out and told us that they don't have money. Where did the money come from? So we are seeing all these things being played, but not as though they were electoral commissioners themselves, but they were also acting as politicians, which is a bad move for democracy.
Yes,
I need to respond to this.
Yes, please go ahead.
In the first place, I don't think Balaam was communicating on behalf of anyone. Not for EC, not for NRM, not for the Republic of Uganda, because those different parties have their respective people in charge of communication. So if Balaam comes up and makes a statement out of his own mind, we can't use that for what the report, for what is the government or NRM's or Electoral Commission's report from the election. And secondly, the deployment that we are talking about, either the NRM candidate isn't saying the security helped her, the Electoral Commission isn't saying the security helped them, neither NUP is saying security helped them. So this security thing, I wouldn't want us to attach it so much to EC or to any other person. It's coming in as security on its own. That's what I was saying. If we are to amend the EC Act, we should start with who is in charge of security and what powers does EC have over security. Can they order for security to leave a polling station? And if Electoral Commission is in charge of the polling area or the polling station alone, I think security arresting someone on Kawempe Road, it's not the responsibility of the EC. So that's why I was saying we should distance EC from much of this that is happening, but rather ask ourselves, why is the army or maybe JAD or maybe police getting involved in this whole process? Maybe stuff I had talked about in my prior discussion. So, clearing the air for Mr. Balaam, he was communicating on his own, not on behalf of anyone or any of the government bodies.
Okay, thank you so much for that, panelist Seth. Coming to Miss Brenda, we've had arguments and the debate still continues on who is to blame for the election violence. Because we are seeing, on the other hand, one is saying the Electoral Commission should have come in, it should have done this, it shouldn't have allowed the security to take over. But again, it is the same body saying we do not know where these people came from, we do not know these people who are masked. And also the government says we do not know these people. So who are these people? Who are these people? Where are they coming from? What is their mandate? What are they doing in a civic election? So as a legal student, who would give your view on that?
Thank you so much. First of all, the Electoral Commission may not know who these military personnel are, where they're coming from, but still it is their responsibility, because you, as the person in charge, if you see that a stranger is entering your premises, it is your responsibility to say that, who is this person? Why is he here? What for? So the EC keeping quiet on that, yet they are saying they don't know who these people are, where they're coming from, leaves a very big question mark on the whole thing. And then still on the government, it's the government that owns this military. They are the ones in charge of the military. They are the ones who deploy them. They're the ones who tell them do this and do that. And if they are claiming they don't know these people, then the entire nation is at stake. We see 2026, a very big trouble is coming ahead. The Electoral Commission should take its responsibilities seriously if they don't want to leave anybody with a question mark on them, and then take their responsibilities of having peaceful elections without necessarily inviting or allowing any stranger around them to disorganize the voters, and then give people peace to vote, and then count in a transparent way that the voters will know that really we won or we did or we lost. That's what it is.
Okay, your insight takes us to who is in charge, who is the commander-in-chief of this army. But the commander-in-chief tells us he does not know who these people are. So in other words, you have referred to them as intruders. So should we be alarmed as a country that we are having people we do not know participating in democracy in our country? So what is your take, Seth, on the issue of having this security present? Because everyone is denying, all the bodies responsible are denying their accountability, they're denying their duties. So who is to blame for this excessive use of security forces?
I think the reason that EC is not owning up to the presence of the security interruption during the voting process is because, in actual sense or in reality, the police did not intervene in the voting process. On the voting day, it was marched on to journalists, and I think they have not come out to tell us why, and everyone was asking why. But I would personally think because these media houses also benefit from this kind of situation. They are kind of catalysts. In one way or the other, they catalyze this process and overhype whatever small thing they land on. So I think it is the security. It is the reason the security came in purposely for the journalists, because the security was so much dealing with the journalists, not to the voters, not to the opposition leaders on the day of the voting. And then the days prior to that, I think EC was less responsible on the other days before voting, whereby they arrested Narcola in his way. And the reason the security give for that is you are mobilizing people and moving with them on the streets, and these people may end up breaking into people's shops and whatever, because they are not organized. They are just going. Even the wrongdoers will join along. So in a way of putting in order something they have not said today or yesterday, what they have always said, find a place, organize a rally, communicate to your people instead of moving along the road with your supporters. But going back to security, I also agree that these people, at one point, they used a lot of power. Maybe it was too much, more than what maybe they should have applied, helped the bad results that may come out of those masses walking on the streets. I think it's never too late to change. The people responsible for the security, the commanders, and at the different levels, I think they can. It's not too late to change. They can change from now on.
Okay. So going around what the tabloids are showing today, when Honorable Nalukola was announced the winner of the Kawempe North by-election, there were so many people disputing the election results. Other parties as well vividly came out to say, no, the EC is not doing the right job. The EC announced the person who is not supposed to be a winner. So I would like to know, how do you think disputed election results could impact Uganda's democracy process? Just John Eliane.
Well, in a free and fair election, everyone has the opportunity and the right to dispute the results that have happened, that have been released. And it's okay, because it's part of democracy, giving that person an opportunity to go and challenge the elections. Because not anyone's soul will believe that they were cheated or that they were genuinely won. We saw the FDC president coming out to say, we are a party of very many years. I think he thought in his mind that by voting or by going into an election, they will vote according to how long you've spent in the election or how long you've spent in the country. But the people are voting the character of the person you've brought. And we're looking at Aganaga as the candidate. And to him and his eyes, that was the best candidate that Uganda needed for Kawempe. And to the shame of the people that were supposed to actually vote the candidate, they said, no, you deserve 200 and you go and rest, maybe go back to music. Then when you look at all these other people, there is what we call false hope in campaigns. That at some point you will move with a gang of 80 people, 100 people, 2,000 people, thinking that is what you had. Now, the president, on the other hand, was also saying, those are not our voters. Now, the president is supposed to be, I'm supposed to look at him as though he's a poor Christ of Uganda. I'm supposed to pity him because he doesn't know what happened. When you look at the Kawempe election that he was going to campaign for Nambi, he was actually deceived about his support. They ferried people to go to Kawempe so that they can give them shirts, give them some food, so that they're able to support the president. That please, yeah, we are supporting you. So to him and his eyes, they saw very many supporters for Kawempe. But the reality is, when he sits down with the Prime Minister and Balam, they know what exactly happened. They know that these were not the voters. The voters were himself and Nambi. Maybe 2 or 3 other people. But the real voters were for another party. So the issue is, everyone will actually cry out. But the president of this country came out to actually say, we are disputing that election. Now, whatever they are doing is just laughable. Because it's like a blind man trying to peep. You're wasting time. Like, you're going to go and challenge an election where you fraudulently, actually, you were involved in an election. You're seeking justice as a thief. So you can't tell us that the president is interested in justice, because he was lied to that he had support in Kawempe, and to him and the corruption of the people that are around him, they told him, you avoid the one. So all those people are now ganging up to go to court to challenge Nalukola's election or Nalukola's win as a president, or I mean as a member of parliament for Kawempe. So this means that everyone is free to go and petition to court. They will go and meet the Chief Justice. They will go and meet the different courts of law that they will petition their issues to, if they really feel like they have issues to put forward, because you need to have substantial evidence. Nambi, on the other hand, was saying, I also had my supporters, that they relied on the issue of those 2 polling stations, where they were claiming that is where they had the issue of destruction of the voting material. But evidence has it that the people who destroyed the voting material on those polling stations were people being guarded by the military. So we are looking at the military as part of the executive. So we are looking at a small plan that can be looked out for without evidence for now, a small plan to go and destroy the ballot boxes, so that you now come out and claim that, oh, my milk has spilled. So I think this person who has been passing Zan who is in charge. But it is you yourself who has destroyed it, so that you get a ground to go and challenge the election, because you know you've already lost it. So at some point, it's like me seeing that I've already lost the competition, but then we're in a competition of drinking something, but then I'm in a competition with those people. 3 of us are drinking tea, and we're in a competition to complete it. So what I do, I decide to squeeze myself to my neighbor, so that my cup now falls down. Then I claim that indeed this person is in charge, because I couldn't complete my tea simply because they pushed me. But it's you who caused it, so that you create a ground for appealing. So the president and his team should not come out to lie that they have a genuine cause of action to win the 17,000 people that the other party president won. For them, their issue is they're trying to create a ground, a firm ground for the next move. So I do believe that all the people who feel bereaved, even the one who got 32, can petition to court if they still have the funds to go to petition to court and the evidence. If I think the 32 people involved him, his wife, and his neighbors that went to the polling station to continue with the election, but they never had genuine vote. They also personally knew on their personal basis that I don't have the support, but they do believed that they were going to win. So I do believe that challenging an election is part of a democratic society, and they are free to go and challenge it, and they will bring their evidence, because the burden will be on them to bring their evidence to show that indeed there was vote rigging, or that they had the support that they claimed to have. Because if they had those eyes that saw what was exactly in the boxes, then we shall continue to listen to them. Now, going back now to 2021, just as a replica of what happened in 2021 petitions, we are looking at the Chief Justice and his team when it came to the election petition of the president and Kyagulanyi. In 2021, Kyagulanyi had a cause of action that I am petitioning to challenge the election or and the win of the president because of these and these reasons. But the Chief Justice and his team showed bias in the whole issue of listening to the petition, and that is why it was consequently withdrawn. So we are looking at the whole thing being a tied knot, that there is no way in and way out. There will be justice when it comes to the county by-elections. If indeed there was fraud, they will overturn the elections, and the right person will be declared. But when it comes to the presidential elections, that is where the Chief Justice and his team will close eyes and act as though they have never studied law. And they will quote things that will be tough. How can you start quoting for a country that indeed the election had malpractice? But malpractice that was involved in 2021 election was not strong enough to overturn an election. The question therefore is, you have allowed now malpractice. It means you have allowed it. As long as it cannot overturn an election. That is a wrong precedent. It's a wrong stare decisis for this country. That the elections were rigged. But that rigging, the percentage that was rigged, could not overturn the election. Meaning, you've encouraged me to also go back and cheat, to go and rig, as long as I cannot go above. What is that? So what is that standard that should not be crossed? That is why we are saying that the Electoral Commission is acting impartial. Actually, it's acting partial because it's not following the standards. Whether there was one polling station that was rigged, one ballot that was rigged, that would only in itself overturn the election, to go back to recounting, to go back to the election itself. But the fact that we have such a system in the electoral process, we do believe that justice will be received for these other things of Kawempe by-election, but for the presidential elections, that is where things will be looked out for in a different direction. Thank you.
Okay, so coming to you, Miss Brenda, drawing in on his submission, as he was saying that it is indeed your right in a democratic society to dispute elections if you feel the need to say that maybe they were unfair in some way, or there was election malpractice or other related vices of the sort. So what would be your take on the current by-elections that we have just finished, where Honorable Nalukola's win is being challenged? What does that mean for Uganda's democracy?
Well, thank you. The challenging of her win means that there's a lot for Uganda to work on, for the EC to work on, and to make sure that there is transparency in its voting system. And then it's a constitutional right, as you said, that for anyone to, it's a constitutional right for anyone to challenge the elections or elections results. But challenging comes with very many things. If you're to challenge something, you have to be having solid proof that really indeed these elections were rigged, and you were maybe thrown away somewhere when they were rigging. Something happened to you, but you cannot be on the side of the military or the side of the NRM government, and then you claim you are the ones that had the security on your side, and then you claim that your votes were rigged. That is a bit questionable. Though still, we wait on to hear what they will come up with next. And
okay, thank you so much, Miss Brenda, for your discussion. So bringing the same question to our panelists, given that what is going around in the tabloids today, Honorable Nalukola's win is being challenged by various parties, by various individuals, saying the election was not fair. So what does that mean for Uganda's democracy journey?
As my colleagues have already stated, it is a democratic right for anyone to challenge an election or to go to courts of law whenever they are seeking justice. However, where I find the problem is if someone goes to court challenging the NRM, that the NRM has rigged an election, some people find it relevant and feel it's right. They are right. They have a right to challenge it. But when it's the other way around and NRM is going to court, some people even laugh at it. I heard my colleague saying that it's funny that NRM is going to court and they are also seeking justice. As I've said, the presence of security during that election didn't mean they were there to rig an election, and they had very little intervention in the voting process. Yeah, and I don't think we had so many excuses after that election of, for instance, Snoop saying that there has been rigging, they have taken this box, they have brought this box on the voting day. We didn't have such excuses. So meaning security, it dealt much with the press and all that, but it didn't involve so much into rigging. So into the voting process. So that means that the election was free and fair in itself. No one was complaining. And if anyone rigged in a certain way, this one has a right to go to court, and with the evidence, as they have already said, someone presents their evidence and they said here and here, the results were like this, but I'm surprised that the results are like this. Oh, in this polling station, registered voters were 2,000 or 1,000, and the votes we had an election in the 2021 election, primaries actually, NRM primaries in my district there. The woman MP had, for example, 15,000, about 15,000 votes, and the district has two constituencies. So the MP of one of the constituency had over 200 votes, 200,000 votes. So meaning the votes from one constituency were more than the votes from a whole district. So meaning this was pure rigging. So someone sometimes has a right to challenge before courts of law as long as they have the evidence. We saw in the 2016 elections, Amambawazi went to court to challenge the election. He was not the runners-up. I think he was third or fourth, but he's the one who went to court. And meaning this person, even when he's sure he may not be the one winning the election, but he wants justice. He wants, if you are winning us, win us in the right manner. You don't have to get extra votes through rigging. So some people, or even all of us, want justice. So I may go to court, not because I'm naked to take the election, but I want justice. I want clean things. And it's good.
Yeah, I think that is a very important point to note, that also NRM elections can be rigged against. So they have a right to go to court. If they have their evidence, they can go to court. And as we said, we are seeking justice. So joining to our panelist, John, our topic for today has been the Justice Minister doubts EC's ability to conduct free and fair elections. So you being a law student from Uganda Christian University, I would like to have your opinion on what you think the role of the court, or rather the legal role of the legal society, is to ensure that the Electoral Commission indeed holds or conducts free and fair elections?
Well, the role of the legal society is to establish a norm, a legal framework that should be followed. Because we're looking at a framework which will be the guiding law. So that law should be put out by people who know the law. So if people start criticizing what is being done, it would actually call for the interpretation of the law. So the legal society is supposed to create those principles that would govern a free and fair election. Without those principles, or breach of those principles would call for a debate, just like this one, would call for a sanction, would call for punishment, would call for court intervention. So we are like the eye openers to all those people who have actually not studied the law. So the legal regime and the legal society is just there to be a handmaid of a democratic society. And going back, I remember the point he was trying to note on the military. The current military intervention was not captured in the law. So we are asking ourselves, what legal regime were they relying on to go and intervene in the Kampala by-election? So we are looking at also who even deployed that JAT, because we are looking at the JAT. JAT is working as one of the extremist group of army that should come out on the end of it all.
But it's assigned under police.
Yes, but who deploys it? Who deploys the JAT? Is it the
That's
IGP?
The commander.
Is it the
commander under IGP?
Under
How we
IGP?
have counterterrorism, how we have PGB, PPU.
So that person must be the one who actually deployed them. They wouldn't have deployed themselves. So someone must have given them that order that please go. So now we are asking, we as the legal regime, we are now asking that why did that person authorize them to go? Because we are looking at if at the end of the day we have the hand of the president, for example, being the commander-in-chief, if the president is involved in deploying these people to come, it then questions the credibility of the election. Because now we are saying that you are the commander-in-chief, NRM, interested in this candidate to win for NRM, but now you've deployed people to now go and cause terrorism the other side, to go and cause chaos for the opposition. That creates that mismatch, and it will create a debate. And these small debates will be the ones to create an informed decision, an opinion that even someone who is not educated about the law would rely on. So the legal regime is supposed to be there as a highlighter for whatever is taking place, that whatever has been done is actually not following the law. Because you can't now deploy and then the Electoral Commission is not informed. We thought that the Electoral Commission should be the one to ask, because it's now the one in charge of the election. He also talked about the fact that if they beat a civilian just somewhere on the street, it does not mean the Electoral Commission has to be answerable, and that's okay. But we are seeing trucks and trucks parked in the polling stations, just 2 meters away from the ballot box. There is a big truck, and I think he must have seen that picture. A truck is parked just near the ballot boxes. What is the meaning of that? Do you think the creators of elections foresaw that we would have such things as part of election? Yes, the police will be necessary, but to a good extent. Because now we don't need you to intervene and actually become a menace, and actually become someone who is intervening to cause chaos. Because we're looking at the people who are coming to cast their votes. They must be free from any coercion. So at the end of the day, there is no reason why you would create all that fear within people. Because we might actually think that very many people were left out of these homes, not to come and vote simply because they feared the heavy deployment. So we are supposed to question all those different episodes that will keep recurring that do not match the standards of the law, as we highlight the democracy that people should have, that things must be like this, and then they were done like this. So it's important, even when you go back to Mao's statement as the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, his statement carries water because he's a minister, just like Balaam. Balaam is also a minister. So his statement as a minister, by saying that we had trucks and trucks of stones, is supposed to be followed. It might not be admissible as evidence for purposes of court record on electoral issues, but he is a minister. He has an office he's holding. So he has people that are respecting him vis-a-vis the statements he's making. So being a minister of children and the youth, we have to question whether now he had to take on the brains of those people he's representing. So you can't be saying that you're coming to speak and you're speaking things that don't make any sense. So those are offices that those people are holding. And we, as the people in charge of the legal sector, we are supposed to question how those things are done. And at the end of the day, we are trying to put the entire democratic process in a check. So we're supposed to check and balance this whole process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. You highlight a crucial point and mention that indeed, and remind ourselves that indeed Balaam is a minister and he has a platform. A platform, he is representing the youth. So when he speaks, he is representing us and our views and our thoughts, our opinions. So indeed, with this platform, there is a lot you can do with it. You could speak against the violations, the evils, the violence that is happening and all the bad vices of the elections that are going on. Or you could do the exact opposite and not uplift and not work for the youth and develop them. So drawing the same question to you, Miss Brenda, our topic today has been the Justice Minister doubts the EC's credibility or ability to be able to conduct free and fair elections. Given that you are a legal student, a law student rather, at King Caesar University, what do you think is the role of the legal system in this whole process?
Thank you. The role of the legal system is these people should emphasize more on the rule of law. Where things have reached now, it seems everyone keeps forgetting their boundaries. Because with the rule of law, everyone should act within their power. You should not act above your powers. So by the security overstepping their boundaries by going to the polling station and then staging there, like they were called, really they overstepped their boundaries and they disrespected the EC. And this calls for the law society to come up and sensitize the people about the law, and they should know when and where to act at what time. And then another thing is the law society should create more principles on how elections are to be conducted. Like that Elections Act has to be amended, showing clearly what steps are to be followed when conducting an election, and then what ways forward for this for our democracy to have meaning.
Well, thank you so much. And the Uganda Law Society has actually come out to advise that the laws of the Electoral Commission should be strengthened so that the roles of the Electoral Commission are rather clarified, so that we know exactly where the boundaries are, so that we know exactly what they're supposed to do in an electoral process. So I think that is an important point that you try to bring forward. So coming to panelist Seth, drawing back to our topic of the day, that the Justice Minister doubt the credibility of the Electoral Commission to hold free and fair elections. I would like to ask, what do you think should be the role of the community in ensuring that these elections are free and fair? Because this is a democratic process for everyone in Uganda.
I think the number one role of the community is abiding by the law, because we must operate in the jurisdiction of the law. If there are established laws governing the Electoral Commission, governing the elections anyway, governing our societies, so the number one responsibility is of any citizen is respecting the law and defending it. I think that's key for all of us. In our communities, where you identify injustice, try to defend it. And in the first place, do not be the one to bring about injustice in that community. So I think as a community, we need to know our boundaries as a people, and then protect those boundaries from being misused or confronted by other parties or other people that may want to abuse those laws.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think all of us indeed, we are the community and we do have a role to play in ensuring that these elections are free and fair. So coming to our panelist, John, I would like to ask, because the topic is drawing in that the Justice Minister doubts the credibility, meaning that there are challenges that the EC is facing. So we've had a whole discussion about these challenges. We'd like you to just highlight which challenges the Electoral Commission is facing right now.
Okay. One of the challenges I would try to put forward if it's any serious anyway, it's one that they have actually said themselves, the lack of funding. They actually stated that they could not gazette Council Local as win simply because they were lacking funds. So if in any way it was made under a genuine statement or cause of action, the first thing that I would state is lack of funding, meaning they would need to get more funds. I don't know how much it would take to go and gazette that they win for them to claim that they don't have the money. But yeah, that's number one. Number two, I would note that they have a challenge with being impartial. So at the end of the day, they are facing a conflict of interest between the appointing authority and then the people that are on the list, on the ballot. We are seeing that the Electoral Commission is appointed by the president, put in this particular office to work for the good of this country, we believe. And then at the end of the day, we are seeing that they must have a conflict of interest that has been shown through bias. Bias is not supposed to be criticized or assessed by actual bias, that the person indeed had the bias. But we, the rational people, what we see from your actions can tell that you're actually biased about a particular aspect. So for you to come out and say that Nalokola, we don't have money to gazette Nalokola's win, but if NUP really feels it's very essential, they will bring the money, we do gazette. That statement was irrational in nature. It shows you're actually biased about the whole person and the win. Someone who is supposed to be impartial is supposed to actually make a normal statement without actually saying that in case you want, you come and bring the money. And we are seeing that we are having a challenge of the military intervening into the democratic process. We are seeing that you have no idea about where these people come from. So you as the Electoral Commission, you should now go back and have a ground reformed to know where you belong, where you start from, and where you end. So that if in case someone else had their particular army, would they deploy it there? Would Kenya deploy its army to come to Uganda to watch over the elections simply because the Electoral Commission is not doing anything? We would actually say, no, go back. So the judge are supposed to have a limit because they also have a mandate that created them to be just to counter terrorism. For you to come out to watch over elections and beat everyone the way you want, it actually shows the Electoral Commission is losing touch. So that challenge of bias and the challenge of the deployment is the biggest, apart from any other challenge that we are seeing, because the rest shall be okay. But the issue of them losing touch with the election actually would make their whole stay a useless one.
Okay, thank you so much for highlighting the challenges that the Electoral Commission is facing. And previously, we've had a discussion on what is our role as the community and what is the role of the legal society or the legal system in this whole debate and in this whole process that we are having. So as we conclude our episode of today, we would like to bring Miss Brenda in to give the concluding remarks as to what is your concluding view to our viewers, to anyone watching from home?
My concluding views to the viewers is that as the Electoral Commission should take their stand and have their independence, not to be influenced by outsiders to make decisions for them that they will just follow. And then as the community, we also have a role to play to make sure that these elections are peaceful and by following the rules that are given and not causing violence that will threaten the security to act the way sometimes they act. And another thing is, going forward, I think the government should also stay far from other authorities when conducting their duties, like the Electoral Commission, by staging military securities to come at the scene really causes a lot and gives fear to the community which way they are going.
Okay, thank you so much. As you have mentioned, we all have a role to play, and the government as well. So coming to Seth, what are your concluding remarks to our viewers?
In regard to our topic of today, I would really believe the EC should take a lesson from every election it organizes. I think it's not so bad rough as some people want to assume, as it has organized many elections and the opposition has won some, the ruling party has won some, meaning one would put across a conclusion that EC is NRM owned and managed, and they make sure NRM wins on every ground. But we have seen it lose on some ground, even grounds where NRM puts a lot of effort, like the Kawempe election, like the Arua by-election, where the competition was so tight, but we've seen these people lose an election. Meaning, EC, personally, I still believe in it. I think it can organize. It can organize any kind of election that we want. Then secondly, it's not perfect, as if we have to check with other countries around the world. I think more than 90% of countries out there, they always have complaints, and especially the losers. Every time you lose an election, you get that feeling of being cheated, because when you get out for a rally, even those who do not support you, they come up to see, especially our Africans. People want to see. You come with musicians, you come, they have been watching you on TV, they have heard about you. People want to see who you are. So when you meet tens of thousands of people in a rally, you feel these people support you. When the same people are going to come next day for your opponent, and another day for another candidate. So we shouldn't overrate ourselves sometimes, or over expect from an election. And whenever we lose an election, before we go public to complain about it, let's first do an inside research and analysis of what could have actually transpired. And we keep hoping for the best, that in 1 or 2 years, or in the future, more improvements will be made. But my key point is, EC should take every election it organizes as a learning, as an opportunity to learn and make improvements.
Thank you so much for those closing remarks. Panelist John, would you like to make any closing remarks to our viewers?
All right. My closing remarks would hinge on that there is an analogy of the religious Satan that we believe is bad. Simply because Satan kills people, we know that means he's bad. By someone dying, it means Satan is bad. Simply because we are still alive, that doesn't mean Satan is good. He still remains bad. So in the Kawempe election, simply because it's NRM that lost and NUP won, still it remains that NRM had actually forged some particular elections. So actually it remains, the track record of what it has been doing does not go away. So in my conclusion, I want us to have hope and to continue believing in electoral commissions and the democratic process, and keep speaking about things that do actually matter, so that at the end of the day, the civic space is informed and it's free for everyone. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That has been our panel for today, as our topic was the Justice Minister still doubts EC's ability to conduct free and fair elections because of the various challenges that the Electoral Commission has been facing, as we have discussed, and as our panelists have suggested ways forward, electoral reforms, and played part by giving us their views on what the legal system and the community at large should do and should help and should chip in to do to make sure that the Electoral Commission indeed conducts free and fair elections. Thank you so much for watching. I have been your host, Sharon Mukisa. Till next time.